To stay with us. Coming up next is Public Intel Go There. Welcome back. The first conference of speakers and heads of African Parliament, CoSAP, was held in Abuja, Nigeria from 9th to 10th May 2022 on the theme of enhancing Africa's post-COVID economic recovery through parliamentary leadership. The conference was initiated by the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I had an interview with Dapo Oyewole, Senior Special Advisor to the Speaker, House of Representatives Nigeria, on international and interparliamentary affairs. Let's take a look. I understand that CoSAP has a lot to do for Africa. And then from the events that you guys had actually had, you talked about the debt cancellation. What does this mean for Africa?
Well, first of all, I mean, CoSAP itself was created to have a platform where all the African speakers and heads of parliament could come together. And I think one of the things COVID-19 made very clear is that these issues and challenges are interconnected. One country cannot handle them alone. And of course, with the speakers as the bastions and the protectors, the defenders of our democracy, they also had to come together and say, how do we work together to solve the problem? Now, COVID itself, if anything at all, was a bit of an X-ray that helped us to see the real state of the social and economic architecture of the continent. And one of the things that it revealed was the fact that, you know, our continent is heavily in debt. About, I think the IMF tells us that about 22 countries in Africa are all facing debt distress. But the fundamental challenge, and this is what brought it forward, was that how do we continue spending on debt servicing when people are dying from the multifaceted impacts of COVID-19? And I think that's what propelled the speakers to start what they call the Debt Cancellation Initiative, to say, listen, if we're going to get this continent on its feet, first of all, we have to think about the people. We have to be able to ensure that we're able to provide health, education, infrastructure, and all the sanitary infrastructure that is required to be able to address the issue of COVID-19. But then also we have to review the debt to GDP ratio across all the continents, across the entire continent, because we can't continue. Many African countries spend more on debt servicing than on health, education, or even on social development. So how will we be able to get the continent on its feet? So they said, listen, what we are willing to do is, on our part as speakers, those who hold the power of the purse, we will make a pledge that says, we will ensure that if we do cancel this debt, we will ensure that we spend more on health, on education, and human capacity development, which are critical for social and economic development, and that they would hold themselves accountable for being able to ensure that there's more spending in this area. And the appeal that they're making to the international lenders is that if you're able to cancel the debt, then we are in a position to grow more economically, and then we can trade more profitably on a longer term basis. So it's a matter of saving the people and at the same time saving the economy for global prosperity.
Awesome. But then you're starting with Africa. Okay. All right. You talked about food insecurity. Now, on food insecurity, how would CoSAP, ensure and enhance agricultural productivity in Africa? How do you intend doing all of this?
Well, as I like to say, a country, a continent that cannot feed itself cannot lead itself. And I think one of the challenges we've observed in the geopolitics of things today, especially with the conflict in Ukraine and how that has affected food security in Africa, it shows you how vulnerable we are. So the first priority as leaders is that we must ensure there's food security on the continent. Now, how do we do this? It means that our speakers must ensure that there's legislation that helps to ensure that there's a more enabling environment for agricultural productivity. And what do we mean? We mean supporting farmers in the multiplicity of ways in which they can do that, providing infrastructure, providing access to capital, and also facilitating intra-Africa trade, particularly through the Africa Continental Trade Agreement. These are some of the critical ways in which we can do that. But the first thing we must say and make a decision about is that Africa must be able to feed itself. And as you know, we used to call Africa the breadbasket of the world. So what has happened that has made us so heavily dependent on imports from abroad? We need to fix that, and our speakers are committed to so doing, as stated in their communique.
So you talked about facilitating the inter-African trade. Does CoSAP have such ability or capacity?
Well, these are the speakers, and as you know, this initiative itself was founded by Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, our speaker. And this is the speaker of the world's largest black democracy, and he has taken the responsibility of bringing together his colleagues to say, hey, we cannot sit on the sidelines. We need to be able to fix this. Now, one of the things that we're doing post the conference is now looking at how to structure CoSAP so that it can do exactly what you're saying, not just talk, but actually be able to implement and be able to drive and implement some of the outcomes of the communique. Going forward, there's going to be another meeting in Canada on the sidelines of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. They will be considering a report on how CoSAP can function, how it will be structured, how it will be funded, but more importantly, how we can make sure that it is not just a talk shop, it is a think and do tank, so to speak, that can actually help to ensure that things are done properly. So it is not just even a matter of capacity, it's a matter of responsibility. Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila and his colleagues have taken on that responsibility.
Okay, all right. During the event, CoSAP actually suggested that there should be some blacklisting of the African Coup country. Now, where does this leave us as Africans?
Well, first of all, we need to step back and look at where we're coming from. I think there have been over 200 coups in Africa since 1950. Now, of course, many of us who were in the pro-democracy movement spent a good part of our lives fighting for democracy. And in many countries across the continent, we now have functional democracies, or at least emerging democracies. The danger and the threat we face is the new spate of coups that you're seeing. I think we've had about 8 coups in about the last 18 months alone. Now, African speakers know that to defend democracy, they need to stand together. And you know that when a coup happens, one of the first things they do is that they suspend parliament. So it is an existential threat, not just to the democracies, but even to the existence of parliament. So what they have decided to do is to reinforce what the African Union has actually agreed as well, that no matter what happens, any unconstitutional change of power in any country, especially through violence, will be eschewed by all these speakers, and that they will come together and they will make a statement and they will work together to make sure that anywhere where there's an unconstitutional change of power, that those countries will be blacklisted, they will be ostracized, and specific actions will be taken in unity by all the speakers across Africa. And I think this is a fantastic sign that does not just show our speakers taking responsibility for defending our democracies, but also saying that they're not going to sit on the sidelines and see the hard work that has been done to create our democracies, be reversed. And I think we cannot have development unless we have democracy, inclusive governance, and that's one of the things CoSAP and our speakers are trying to ensure happens. So where does it leave Africa? It leaves Africa in a state where we see our speakers taking sizable, effective and action, and taking on the responsibility of defending Africa's democracy.
Okay, now blacklisting the coup countries in Africa, wouldn't this be like a threat to most of the countries? And when you talk about their national security, wouldn't this be a threat to their national security when you blacklist them?
Well, I actually don't like the word blacklist because it has all kinds of connotations and all kinds of interpretations. Right. But what specifically was said in the CoSAP communique is that the African speakers will come together to ensure and take all measures possible to ensure that those countries are returned into proper democracies. Okay. And that may include, on one hand, not allowing military dictatorships to participate in a fora like CoSAP, for example. So when it's more about ostracizing, penalizing, but ostracizing and penalizing with the objective of ensuring that those countries return to democracy and not necessarily to punish the people who are already victims of these coups anyway.
Okay, I would like to ask, sometimes when you delve into something, there might be just a rise when there's an attack, trying to talk to the coup countries, and then I wouldn't say there's a rise of coup in Africa, but there might likely be a rise. And now talking to those guys, I wouldn't know how CoSAP would want to do that with other African parliaments. But then again, venturing into this, would there not be a rise of other coup in other African countries? Do you think so?
Well, that is exactly what CoSAP is trying to avoid. a rise in coups in other countries by being able to say, if you do find yourself in a scenario where the military takes over power, do not expect that you will be embraced by the fold of African parliaments. That's the very first thing. The second thing is that I think in international relations, one of the things is that for any government to be legitimate, it needs to be accepted in the Committee of Nations. Now, with the power that all the African speakers have as one entity coming together under the CoSAP umbrella, then they have the advocacy power to actually refute the acceptance of these countries in the Committee of Nations, which again helps to put a roadblock in the ability to think that a coup is the best way to take over power. So if anything at all, I think the steps that are being taken by our very brave speakers under the CoSAP umbrella is exactly what will help to ensure that any country or any military entity that thinks that they can just usurp power and take over democratically elected governments, they will not be accepted. And that our speakers will be working together, speaking together, advocating together to ensure that they return those countries to constitutional democracies.
Okay, all right. After the conference, I would like to ask, because CoSAP is something very new in Africa, and from what I'm seeing, they are really taking so much strength and grace, trying to carry out a lot of things, addressing a lot of issues in Africa. Now, after the conference, what next?
Well,
what is next for CoSAP?
Absolutely, and you're right. It is quite an Herculean task to say, you want to start something new. This is the first time in African history, and I very much have to commend Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, the Speaker of Nigeria's House of Representatives, for founding, for convening, and for driving the entire initiative. It shows his vision of not just the role Nigeria plays in Africa, but globally. And this is exactly what Nigeria needs to be doing, leading from the front, so to speak. And the fact that all the other speakers supported this initiative shows that we still have the respect that we have across Africa. But what do we do with this? It means that we now need to translate our words into actions. It now means that we need to build an effective structure that is going to enable CoSAP to be able to function. And very, very importantly, it does not in any way replace other very important African institutions, the Pan-African Parliament, the African Parliamentary Union, and of course the organs of the African Union. What it seeks to do is to complement them by bringing the voice, the gravitas, and of course the knowledge and the experience of all the speakers to the table to say, in the multiplicity of issues and challenges that we face across the continent, you don't have to do it alone. The speakers will come together and they will help to support how these things are done, either collectively as one in terms of advocacy, or actually through driving and supporting legislation at the national level. I think it's a very good time for Africa. It begins to reflect an Africa coming into its own. And I think Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila starting CoSAP itself shows that he sees the role of democracy as a very important instrument of development. And for us to be able to develop as a continent, we need to ensure that we have a functional democracy. And of course, the pillar of democracy are the parliament. And that's exactly what they are seeking to do.
Awesome. Okay, for CoSAP, do you have a space for youth, peace, and security for the youth in the African continent?
In fact, if you go through the CoSAP communique, we've gone much further than that, because one of the things the speakers themselves are saying that we must see is an inclusive governance architecture across the whole continent. So you will find in the communique they talk about not just youth, women, including people living with disabilities who are often left on the margins of society. What they want to build is an Africa that is for all Africans, irrespective of gender, irrespective of age, religion, creed, ability, or disability. For us to get our continent off the ground and to be able to come into its fullness of its own, we need every single African to be able to put all the hands on deck to be able to build our continent. And that is exactly what CoSAP and the speakers behind it are trying to drive. An inclusive Africa.
Thank you very much. It was very nice having this interaction with you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
The Conference of Speakers and Heads of African Parliament, CoSAP, is a new body that aims to facilitate improved deliberation, collaboration, and cooperation between the speakers and heads of African Parliament and national assemblies across the African continent, just to foster peace, unity of the continent. We've gone a short break now. We'll be right back.